Here we'll do another example of a quadratic equation. We have x squared equals negative 4x plus 1. As with our previous example, when we have a second power equation with an x that is second degree, we will move all of our terms to the left side. Therefore, we will take that negative 4x and positive 1 and move it. When we move the negative 4x, it becomes positive 4x, and when we move the positive 1, it becomes negative 1. We will now have x squared plus 4x minus 1 is equal to 0. Once you have your second power equation all on the left side, we can try to factor. Our c term here is negative 1. The only two things that will multiply to negative 1 are 1 and minus 1. If we try to add those together, we will get 0, and that is no match. In order to factor, we would have to get two numbers that add to make positive 4, and in this case, that's not possible. For that reason, this equation is not factorable, and we'll have to use what's called the quadratic formula instead. Here's what the quadratic formula looks like. This will be negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac, all divided by 2a. The a, b, and c come straight from our quadratic equation, where a is the coefficient of the x squared term, b is the coefficient of the x term, and c is the constant term. We'll write that below for clarity. Our x squared term has no coefficient, so our a is the invisible one. Our x term has a 4 in front, so b is equal to 4, and our constant c is negative 1. Let's now place the numbers into the quadratic formula. We have negative b, that's 4, plus or minus square root. B squared would be 4 squared, minus 4 times a, that's 1, times c, that's negative 1. This is all divided by 2 times a, which again, a was 1. The challenge to this problem is now simplifying these square roots and numbers. The first thing I would recommend that you do with the quadratic formula is simplify the numbers inside of the square root. We should simplify the 4 squared and the negative 4 times 1 times negative 1. We know that 4 squared is 16, and negative 4 times 1 times negative 1 would give us plus 4. This will be under the square root. The negative 4 plus or minus that still comes before. And then on the bottom, 2 times 1 is, of course, 2. Now we can simplify what's in the square root. We'll say 16 plus 4 will give us square root of 20. Now let's try to split that square root using our perfect squares. There aren't that many perfect squares that are lower than 20, but what we could use is 4. That's our lowest perfect square that will help us here. And we can split that 20 into 4 and 5, because 4 times 5 would give us 20. However, square root of 4 is the same as 2, so we can say square root 20 is 2 root 5. So we will now have negative 4 plus or minus 2 root 5 divided by 2. We can simplify this a little bit more by splitting the terms in the numerator. Anytime you have 2 terms in the numerator but 1 in the denominator, you can split this fraction up into 2 fractions. When we split these fractions, we will get negative 4 over 2 plus or minus 2 root 5 over 2. Once you've split the fractions, you may be able to see that you can cancel these fractions down. Negative 4 divided by 2, if we did that division, is negative 2. 2 root 5 divided by 2 will allow us to cancel the 2 in front of the root 5 and the 2 on the bottom out and give us square root 5, and we write plus or minus in between. Therefore, our solutions will be as follows. We will have x equals negative 2 plus root 5, and x also equals negative 2 minus root 5. These will be our two solutions to this second power equation. Unless your grader specifically asks you to, it's typically good enough to write these as your solutions without going to your calculator.